there, it's Leona. Welcome to Zen Mindfulness Shodo. Today, we are gonna practice Shodo meditation while focusing on the Kanji character for 3. So, let's begin our beautiful journey together. When you write a character, imagine a square about the size of the character that you are gonna write like this. First, I'm gonna write it. Then I'm gonna explain the points and tips for writing the character beautifully in detail. Let's start the explanation. The first stroke begins from a point slightly higher than the center point of the top left square. At the starting point, place the brush at an angle of about 30 to 45 degrees like this. Once you've placed the brush, without moving its position on the paper, lightly press towards the tip of the brush and stabilize it. The line doesn't curve down sharply, but as you move the brush, be conscious of curving it down a bit. How far to the right should you move? Move to the right and upwards until the middle vertical line comes roughly to the center. The ending point, like the starting point, is made by lightly pressing towards the brush tip for about a second, without moving the brush's position on the paper. This results in an ending point like this. From this ending point of the first stroke, move the brush down to the left like this, and the second stroke will be slightly shorter than the first stroke. So this starting point will be slightly to the right of the first stroke's starting point, at about the height of the middle horizontal line. At the starting point, place the brush at an angle of about 30 to 45 degrees, just like the first stroke. Once you've placed the brush, without moving its position on the paper, lightly press towards the tip of the brush to stabilize it. After stabilizing the brush, like the first stroke, draw a line that curves down slightly like this. It's not a sharp curve, and it might look almost straight, but if you look at the upper line, you can see it's curving a bit around here. It's about this much. Move the brush to the right at an angle that appears parallel to the upward angle of the first stroke. How far to the right should you move? Like the first stroke, until the middle vertical line comes roughly to the center. So, this ending point will be slightly to the left of the first stroke's ending point. The second stroke is about the same length as the first stroke, and it's fine if the starting point is directly below the first stroke's starting point, or if the ending point is around directly below the first stroke's ending point. However, if the second stroke appears longer than the first stroke at a glance, it might not look good as the Japanese or Chinese character for 3. So it's fine to make them the same length. But it's better to consciously write the second stroke slightly shorter than the first. The ending point, like that of the first stroke, is made by lightly pressing towards the brush tip, resulting in an ending point like this. If you don't just stop lightly here, but apply strong pressure, a bump might form here, or the ink might bleed. So it's good to be conscious of stopping with the same brush pressure you've been using without pressing hard. Now, from this ending point of the second stroke, move the brush down to the left like this. The third stroke starts at a height where the spacing between the 3 lines appears about the same when viewed, and a point a little bit to the left of the first stroke's starting point. At the starting point, place the brush at an angle of about 30 to 45 degrees, just like the starting points of the first and second strokes. Once you've placed the brush, without moving its position on the paper, lightly press towards the tip of the brush to stabilize it. After stabilizing the brush, this time the third stroke is, to put it extremely, like this, a line that curves upward. If you look at the bottom part of the third stroke, this part, you can see it's curving up quite sharply like this. So this is a line that curves upward, but for the left half before the middle vertical line, move the brush to the right while curving upward, parallel to the upward angle of the first and second strokes. From around where you pass the middle vertical line, gradually ease the upward angle. Don't keep going up at the same angle all the way, but from here, ease it until the bottom line becomes roughly parallel with the middle horizontal line. From there, it's a feeling of going slightly down to the right. How far to the right should you move? Like before, move to the right until the middle vertical line comes roughly to the center. The ending point, like those of the first and second strokes, is made by lightly pressing towards the brush tip, resulting in an ending point like this. If you lift the brush from the paper immediately after moving to the right, the jagged parts of the brush will be visible here. So to prevent this, when you reach this point, stop lightly in place with the same brush pressure without pressing down. This should prevent bumps from forming and ink from bleeding, resulting in a clean appearance. So when writing the Japanese or Chinese character for 3, the first and second strokes are lines that curve downward, and the third stroke is a line that curves upward. Writing it this way, with the 2 short lines at the top curving downward, and the long line at the bottom curving upward, creates a sense of tension between the top and bottom, resulting in a more strong-looking character. One of the key points when writing this character is the ratio of the lengths of these 3 lines. For example, if I write an example here, if you write it like this, with the first stroke being the shortest, the second stroke being the second longest, and the third stroke being the longest, forming a pyramid-like shape, it will look odd as the shape of the Japanese character for 3. So it's important to make the middle line the shortest, or make the second stroke in the middle almost the same length as the first stroke, with only the bottom third stroke being clearly longer. Some people write all the lines about the same length. For example, if you write the 3 lines almost the same, with only the bottom third stroke appearing slightly longer than the top 2 lines, but almost the same length. This also doesn't look very good as the Japanese character for 3. Also, when the 2 spaces between the 3 lines are different. For example, if I write examples here, in this left example, the space between the first and second strokes is narrow compared to the wide space between the second and third strokes. This kind of imbalance doesn't look neat. Similarly, in this right example, the space between the first and second strokes is wide compared to the narrow space between the second and third strokes. When these 2 spaces between the 3 lines don't appear about the same, the overall balance of the character looks bad. So, it looks better when you can write the 3 horizontal lines at a height that leaves these 2 spaces indicated by circles between the first, second, and third strokes appearing about the same space at a glance. Also, when these 3 lines don't appear parallel. For example, if I write examples here, if you write the first stroke normally angling upward to the right, but the second stroke's upward angle is stronger than the first stroke's, causing these 2 lines to gradually get closer as they go to the right. So these 2 lines are not parallel. And then if the third stroke becomes a downward line, now the second and third strokes are gradually getting farther apart as they go to the right. So this is also not parallel. And this kind of writing makes the overall balance of the character look bad. The example on the right is similar. In this case, the second stroke is angling downward to the right, and the third stroke is angling upward to the right, a bit too strongly, so the three lines don't appear parallel. This also makes the overall balance of the character look bad, so it's good to be careful about these points. Why don't you try practicing while keeping these points and tips in mind? The key points and tips for writing kanji beautifully, as explained in the video, are concisely summarized in this book. Additionally, easily understandable Zen mindsets and philosophical messages are shared in this book. For those who want to practice directly in this book, I've also prepared a workbook. The writing tips and techniques are the same as in the Zen Mindfulness Shodo book. Each page allows you to practice one character. If you're interested, please see the description. When you practice with a brush, I recommend that you place a few pieces of paper under the page that you're writing on, so that the ink doesn't bleed onto the page under it. Alright, let's get started.